Hi, welcome to another Q&A video with me. I'm Jade. What I've been doing is whenever I post a video, any questions that I get in the comments, so feel free to leave your comments below, I then do Q&A videos to answer all your questions. So it's a nice opportunity for you to ask me anything that you want about OCD and I will respond directly to you. So I've got a list of questions here on my screen that I'm going to run through and hopefully they will be useful to you. Yeah, cool. So Matthew asks, Jade, daft question. It's never a daft question. How do you differentiate between not minding a relapse, but also really not wanting it to happen? Also, how did you overcome the fear of living with your children wanting you if your fear came true? My rational thoughts are it would really suck, but they have a great mum and family. And if I was detached from them in life, time would go on, they'd be happy, and I would come to terms with it too. Not what I want, but of course, upsetting to consider. So I think that, Matthew, I think you've kind of answered your own question there towards the end. You've really well expressed this idea that acceptance isn't agreement. So when we're working on unconditional self and life acceptance, and if you guys haven't learned about that yet, it's a really great tool for helping with overcoming your OCD. It helps you to see that no matter what the fear that we have, the deep-rooted core fear that the OCD is latching to, we can start to see it as less terrifying and more of something we prefer not to have. So what Matthew's talking about here is if his great fear is based on his theme, the great fear would be, what if I never get to see my children? What if something goes wrong? It's like, yeah, you never would want that, but lots of people have lived that reality. And so let's have a look at the irrational beliefs fueling the fact that we couldn't live life. It would be the worst thing that's ever happened. That is a pretty meaty one. I mean, that's not an easy one to come to terms. That's not the same as I'm scared I'm going to lose my job. Those types of fears we can more rationally apply. It would be really terrible, really sad, but we could certainly move beyond it. I think the reason that OCD latches so hard in these areas for parents is that our brain knows that our kids are like the most important thing to us, or one of the most important things to us. So yeah, also recognizing that that's how OCD operates really helps me as well. I do always come back to this thing of like that fear of social rejection, that fear of the worst thing happening in the world. I genuinely believe that like no matter what happened to me in my life, as long as I had access to some books and a safe, warm place, I could find a way to exist. And I think that Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is a great read if you feel like what I just said is crazy, because I think when we're pushed to the absolute depths of suffering in life, which in many ways we have as OCD sufferers, we realise that we actually could tolerate some of the things that would terrify us. Also, how do I differentiate between not minding a relapse but also not wanting it to happen? Yeah, that's a really common question. And it sounds like maybe you're trying to force it, you're trying to want it to be, I don't want to mind, I don't, but I really don't want it to happen. I wouldn't say that you're aiming for, oh, I wouldn't mind if it happened. Like if you think of an illness, if I try and make peace with getting a terminal illness, I'm not saying, oh, I don't mind. I don't mind if I get a terminal illness. I'm saying I really wouldn't want that. And that is, for me, that is true. I don't have any OCD concerns or fears health related. So I respond to health concerns in the same way a person without OCD would. So if we use this example, how would I differentiate between not minding having a terminal illness, but also not wanting it to happen? It's like, well, because I'm not terrified of it and super zoomed in on it, I'm not obsessing about it. But at the same time, I definitely wouldn't want it to happen. So I think maybe the word not minding is the issue, and also not minding a relapse. Yeah, it's the same thing as what you're asking. No one wants to relapse. Let's be real here. Like the depths of OCD suffering is really hard. So I think maybe try and shift your focus on, if your aim is to not mind at all, it's like, yeah, hey, I wouldn't want it, but I could certainly survive. And that's where Albert Ellis's books, particularly How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable, would be really worth another read there, because it's this idea of coming to terms with you can you can live in conditions that you don't want. So thanks for that question, Matthew. Just getting to my next question. Okay, so Aaron says, right now I'm having this fear of fear cycle. I had sleep anxiety, which caused me fear of fear and insomnia. Right now, my mind is trying to find new things to be scared about, to make me fail in stuff. It's also trying to find new things for me to fear and not allow any happiness in me. Thank you. So, Aaron, yeah, it sounds like fear of fear has really gripped you here. You're sort of wondering what next because you felt how scary it is when an OCD fear really latches, and you really obviously don't want to go back to that. And what I would say there is try and work on whatever the core fears are. So if it was me, I would have a look at what is it I'm like really scared of ultimately. Am I scared of being stuck here? Am I scared of suffering again really badly? So if your OCD is scanning around trying to find the next thing, it's almost like you're in a bit of a limbo land. Perhaps you've overcome some of the fears. But I know that feeling well, where you're sort of laying in bed and you can't really sleep and you're just panicking, like what's going to happen. And you did add to this question, Aaron. You said you've been watching videos and learned about sensory motor OCD and then couldn't get out of your head. And you started to notice your own breathing and blinking. Should I be doing exposure and feeling the blinking? How can I overcome this and this fear of fear? So I actually experienced this a few weeks ago because I think often about Nick Anthony, who does a lot of videos on this channel, and he talks about being conscious of his saliva. That was his main issue with OCD and main fear. And one night I was just laying there and I was like, I'm thinking about it. Why am I thinking about it? Like, why does that stuff not latch? And it didn't get even close to latching, but it was a weird sensation because I thought, I've never thought of this before. What if my OCD goes there? And something I often found terrifying was like, my brain can go anywhere it wants, and I know that OCD can latch to anything. And so that's why I think that working on unconditional self and life acceptance is really important, because the idea that, look, no matter what you throw at me, life, no matter what OCD throws at me, I can still find a way to survive, to live, potentially take meaning from any of that suffering. And so it's like you're making peace with this idea of what's it going to latch next. You can be like, well, whatever you want to latch to, I'm here, I'm going for life anyway. That can be really useful for overcoming fear of fear, is just relaxing into it and being like, do you know what, throw me whatever you've got, because I've dealt with it once and I can deal with it again. I hope that's helpful, Aaron. We've got quite a lot of questions today, so I'm going to try and get through them. Smither says, can I ask how frequently do you connect with Rob or any therapist? So Robert Bray is OCD Recovery. He runs the business. So he was my life coach, is my life coach in relation to OCD recovery. So I don't have any therapy or sessions anymore because I would consider myself on the other side of OCD suffering. That doesn't mean my life is perfect and I never ever feel that I have OCD at all. From time to time, a little bit of fear pops up. And when that happens, which is maybe every 6 months or so, I might have a check-in session with Rob or one of the team, and they sort of help me get my head back on track. And that's usually all I need. But when I was very unwell, it's difficult for me to advise on what any individual would need to do, but I had been suffering for so long that I needed a very intensive program. So I decided to save up a lot of money so that I could really get serious about my recovery. And what I did was I had a one-to-one every week for about 6 weeks. And then I had a one-to-one every 2 weeks for maybe a couple of months. And I just slowly reduced it down. I don't necessarily think that everybody needs that amount of life coaching or therapy. I think if you can afford it, I think that is the best way. I mean, I probably could have done with 2 sessions a week at my worst. because you just need that constant motivation and guidance, because we can kind of go wrong a little bit and we can be like misunderstanding any things that we're trying to break down or anything that we're trying to do. So yeah, I had CBT, I had talking therapy for 3 years, which didn't work. It made me worse. Then I had CBT for 2 years, which made me about 60% better, which was incredible. My life was so much better. And then I did about 8 months of therapy, like I said, like reducing down every couple of months, so that it was like once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, once every other month. And what I would also do is I would be on like the webinars as well with the group coaching, so that I'd have that check-in. And also the WhatsApp groups that I was in as part of being in life coaching with OCD recovery were really useful, because when I was suffering, I had that support network in between sessions who would stop me seeking reassurance, who wouldn't allow me to be compulsive, who wouldn't engage in things like that, but they would help remind me of what to do. So I don't need or use those groups anymore. I'm in one. I know where people are if I needed anything, but I don't really use them anymore, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't have therapy or use any groups anymore. This is a strange name, the 64V. Hey, I'm not sure we can post our requests for topics. Okay, so comment, so like if you have a question now, comment on this video, and that's how you get on to the next Q&A video that I'll do. So these are the topics you would like me to talk about. I'm going to cover a couple. Okay. Avoidance of certain tasks at certain times due to OCD. It's usually unwanted avoidance because I usually really want to do the thing, but I'm experiencing demand resistance. Okay, so I'd love it if you could comment a little bit more on this video so that I can cover this on the next one, because I think I need more background. One example I would give is that I know of people who suffer with anxiety around eating and having a full stomach, and they have a rule like, I'm not eating after 6 p.m, otherwise I'm going to get really unwell. So if it's things like that, I would say that's an OCD rule and you need to break it. So a great exposure will be to just stop following these rules. One of the things that I actually did on one of my first ever life coaching sessions with OCD recovery is I'd said, like, one of the minor fears of mine was I wouldn't have caffeine after 2 p.m. because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to sleep in the evening. And he said, well, go and make a coffee right now. It was 6 at night. And I just kind of like drank it, and I felt a bit anxious, but I was breaking OCD rules. So don't overthink it too much. Just break the rule and let any discomfort in. A discussion about how to overcome and decrease limerence. Real limerence, not fantasy and not romantic OCD, which is different. Limerence is unwanted, intrusive obsessions about the limerent object, when you do not want to think about the person at all. You also do not want to be in a relationship with the person in order to be limerent. Okay, so this is quite a detailed point, which tells me that you may well be feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the topic of limerence and wanting to feel like you understand it, and you definitely don't want this person that you're limerent about. So I understand limerence, and I've had experience of it myself, and it can be very intense. I did find that breaking down the irrational belief of why must I not have these thoughts. Say, for example, you're in a relationship, but who you're feeling limerence towards is not the person you're in a relationship with, and you feel like you shouldn't have feelings for that person. I think it's about making peace with, well, who says, married people a lot of the time, it's like this this sort of, well, I should never ever have eyes for anyone else again in my life. I said on my wedding day, forever until death do us part, and I promise to love you and honour you and all this stuff, which is a really nice commitment, but it's also unrealistic to suggest that someone would go through life not feeling something. Oh, there's a magpie right outside. Yeah, so limerence, I would say treating it the same as real event OCD in a way. So it's like, we're never going to know if limerence is overinflating our feelings for somebody. And like you said, it can be with someone that you fundamentally don't want to be with or would be with. Yeah, I also found it useful to just see it as like a series of thoughts and chemical reactions that our body's designed to create as part of biology. So yeah, I could do a separate video on this perhaps if there is interest in it, because I have got experience with that. So yeah, I think limerence is kind of similar to OCD in that it's like obsessive, isn't it? Okay, let's get to our next question. Hi Jade, this is Ellen. Hey Ellen. I'm not sure what things to say yes to and what to say no to. I'm trying to recover from bad OCD, housebound for months, not working for a year, still unemployed. I'm so sorry to hear this. But I'm not sure whether saying yes to some things would be too far a leap. How did you navigate this stage of recovery? Whether to take things slow or go all in? Like always, I just want to say I'm so sorry you're going through this. Being housebound is no way to live, and it's really, really hard. And I was actually talking to Sam on another video last night. We did like a real talk discussion that should be on the channel. Sam is one of the other people who makes videos, and we were talking about the fact that even though we weren't technically housebound, we were in life in that we could not do certain things outside of our certain routines and comfort zones. So I understand that feeling, and I just really hope that you can start to see some strides going forwards to help get you out of the house. And I love this question because there's so much hope in it. You're asking like, what can I do? Should I say yes? What should I do? So I love that your like mindset seems really motivated. And also just to add to that, like if like me, I definitely felt this. If like me, you're feeling like it's, you know, the fact that you're not working right now, the fact that you're stuck in the house is some kind of weakness in you. I'm not saying you do feel that way, but I felt that way. I thought, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just pull myself together? Like, you are stronger than anyone I know. Like, people going up to work and looking after their home and doing all these things, living without the mental illness that you're living with, you are exceptionally more strong and capable than them. Not to put down people who don't suffer with a mental illness at all, but I think there's this feeling sometimes of like, oh, you poor thing. I don't feel that way about you at all. I feel like, wow, another day of you battling and asking a question on this channel of what can I do, because I need to overcome this. And I think that's something to like tap into within yourself. So yeah, this is a really common fear that I had, and I've heard lots of other people have had in relation to like, what if I push myself too far with my fears? So this is just my view and my perspective. I understand that sometimes like going from zero to just like, for example, I wouldn't suggest if you're housebound booking a holiday to Barbados for tomorrow. But I think we need to be scared enough that we really, really don't want to do it. I think if you're setting exposures that are not particularly that bad, where you're like, oh, I'll go into the front garden and spend a few minutes, but if I see someone, I'll come in, would need to be something that pushed you a little bit further than that. Like if you are literally not leaving the house, like would it be, you know, I'd like to build up to be able to go and buy some shopping in the local store at the end of the street. And at first I'll go during quiet times, but I'll build up to go when it's a lot busier. I don't know your fears and I don't know what's going on for you, but just, you know, it does need to be like, from what I understand of having gone through exposure therapy myself, when I've worked with therapists and life coaches alike, they've always said to me, it needs to be like moving, like think of it like a staircase. And another useful thing I had was that it is okay to take a little sit on the step at some point. So let's say you're going up and then it's all feeling a bit much. It's okay to take a day to just sit on the step, and then tomorrow keep going and trying and just welcoming in whatever feeling you have. So I hope that's useful, and I'd love to hear from you again. Okay, what's our next question? Luca says, I'm now at a point where my anxiety only happens every once in a while. Awesome. I can go days without anxiety, but then suddenly have an intrusive thought and I feel locked back. That is like the most accurate description. Locked back. It's like That's exactly it. I find it very hard to not engage with my thoughts at such times because it's so in the foreground. I find myself half reassuring myself. Yeah. Starting a reassuring sentence but not finishing it, so I know it's a compulsion. Eventually it dies down, but usually because of this reassuring behaviour. Do you have any tips to deal with this anxiety? It always makes me very exhausted, and to avoid that exhaustion, I give in. My mind is blown. There is so much to talk about right now. Okay, this is like, for me, this was like the halfway through recovery stage, and it takes me right back. You're like, oh, this is going great. Everything's great. Bang. Like the thoughts still get you out of nowhere. And I've definitely been there. And I got it really loads when I was doing exposure programs. So it would be like, oh, if I only hadn't done that exposure, I wouldn't have to be feeling this way. So one thing I would say here, it sounds to me like you did something that I did, which was trying not to engage in the thoughts. I think sometimes it's good to just let our brain do whatever it's doing. So trying to stop yourself reassuring yourself in some ways is engaging. So we're not trying to do anything. We're just allowing things to take place and happen. So I wouldn't try too hard to stop your brain doing things. Obviously, if you spot that you're actively thinking, like, what can I think to reassure myself? Try and do something else. Something I used to find really useful in this stage was like, get on with practical life. Like, don't slump into it. Don't just sit watching TV hoping it passes. Get out for a nature walk. Organize a cupboard. Do something productive. You know, something that's just normal life, living life. Carry on with your day as normal. Go and meet a friend. Do something, not from a distraction point of view, but from a, this is going to pass and I'm not engaging with it. It always makes me very exhausted, and to avoid that exhaustion, I give in. Okay, get comfortable with being exhausted. I can tell you I'm exhausted. I've had my kids just don't give me a second, but I've made peace with exhaustion. This is how I'm living for a minute. I'm in survival mode right now, not with OCD, with exhaustion and with just overstimulation and life stuff. And I'm at peace with, this is survival mode right now. I can't give as much as usual. I haven't got as much available resource as I would want. And yeah, so acceptance of exhaustion could be really helpful for you here as well, Luca. Hawaii dispenser. These YouTube names are like brilliant, aren't they? So there's a picture of a rabbit here. So it says, hi Jade, what medications, if any, were you on to help with OCD, and are you on any now? Okay, this is such an interesting question because obviously when it comes to medication, like the person you have to be asking is your doctor in terms of like what you should do. That's really important. Nobody can advise you about medication other than a doctor because it's medication, it's your medical records. It's really important. So people can say, a therapist or a life coach could say, seems like you're having a really hard time. I'd like you to talk to your doctor about medication options, but you're asking me about my experience. So I do not want you to take this as what you should do or what everyone should do. So I've never been on medication and I'm not on it now. And I definitely don't need to be on it now. I didn't know I had OCD for 17 years, so it wouldn't have been possible for me to be on medication, though I think that it would definitely have been beneficial to me when I was in a really bad place. You know, I didn't have access to any support. I didn't have an OCD therapist. I didn't know I had OCD. So if someone had given me medication back then, I think maybe it would have helped me until I'd found the right solution. Interestingly, when I found the therapy and life coaching models that worked for me, I still didn't look into medication because I thought I'm going to give this my best shot. And if at any point I feel I can't cope, I will consider that. It's also worth noting that in the early stages of understanding I had anxiety, I was very scared about things like that. So the idea of taking medication was quite scary. So anytime a family member would say, oh, do you know they have pills for things like this, they could help you, I'd be like terrified. So yeah, that's my story when it comes to medication. And time for a couple more. Steffi. Hey, Steffi. She says, hey, great video, thanks. I've been suffering with harm OCD since I had a nervous breakdown 19 months ago. It's gotten better, but then kind of worse too, and I don't have any compulsions as such, but I think I ruminate a lot and constantly check for the thoughts. Oh, I haven't taken a breath. Constantly check for the thoughts. Breathe. Is there anything I can do to stop this and just to lose the fear? Okay, so I'm really sorry to hear about this nervous breakdown. And that's a long time to have been suffering, 19 months. So I don't have any compulsions, but I ruminate a lot. Yeah, so with harm OCD, POCD, rumination is like the big one because you're basically working it out. You're trying to work out, does this mean something about me? Am I safe? What triggers are around me? What could happen? What type of person am I? And so it's just a constantly checking for thoughts, constantly checking for sensations, constantly checking for proof, evidence, scanning the past. Maybe you're avoiding situations. So I would say that what I would do if I were you is I would be working on exposures and the core fear. So finding out what the core fear is most likely with harm OCD, from my experience of speaking to others, social rejection. So it's like, you know, when harm OCD latches is because we think that the outcome of what we're fearing would be like horrendous, and, you know, being the type of person that would act on something so terrifying is who we are, and that would write us off from society, and that would be awful. So I would have a look at the reading list, if you haven't already, on the OCDrecovery.com website. There's like a resources section and it says reading list, and just start reading the list of books in order. Maybe hop on one of the webinars, because it sounds like you've not yet looked into this idea of unconditional self and life acceptance. Perhaps watch some of the videos on unconditional self and life acceptance as well. But yeah, I think also, you know, it says I don't have any compulsions, but I think I ruminate a lot. Like, that is the compulsion. So that's the main compulsion with these forms of pure OCD, as people sometimes call them. Also, your question, you know, that raises to me what I went through, which is, your question is there anything I can do to stop this and just to lose the fear? You're wanting it to stop is usually what makes it lock even harder. And I know that's an impossible thing to say. Like, that just sounds so ridiculous. How would I not want this? But try and live your life alongside this as best you can while working towards recovery and being like, I'm living life. If I have to accept that this is going to be my life forever, that's what I'm accepting. I hope it's not, but I'm getting on with life anyway, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get better. I hope that's helpful. Ryan says, do you have experience with health OCD related to fear of exhaustion? I don't have a fear of exhaustion. I just actually am exhausted. So I have never experienced health OCD. I actually lie. About 10 years ago, I would, if I felt like any kind of like lump in my body, I would like flood with anxiety thinking I had cancer or something, but it didn't latch for very long. Fear of exhaustion does nip at me actually, because I think with me it would be like, don't stay up too late, because if you stay up really late, you're more likely to have your terrifying nightmares and OCD will latch, and then the next day you're going to feel awful, or OCD is going to creep back in if you're not getting enough sleep. Because, like, to be honest, that is true, isn't it? Like, if we're not in a great mental state, we're more likely to suffer with our OCD. So I would say that my experience with fear of exhaustion was recognizing that I can live in an exhausted state, even though I thought I couldn't. And in my most exhausted, which was where, with my first child, I think she woke me every 45 minutes through the night for like about 3 months. And I was suffering with extreme OCD at the time. So it did feel like physical, mental torture, exhaustion. Now that was like very, very, very difficult to live with. But I'm here and able to talk about it. So that's a positive that comes out of it, is that I went through that and now I can resonate with others. So yeah, I would say that's my answer to your question, Ryan. And then Olivia says, do you offer one-to-ones? And she's asking if I offer one-to-ones. I actually don't, Olivia. So I don't work for OCDrecovery.com. I contribute videos as someone who's used the services and gotten loads better and is really like a big advocate for the business, but unfortunately I don't do one-to-ones. Yeah, I have so limited available time. Even doing these videos is tough, but yeah, I'm sorry about that. But the rest of the team are awesome if you need some help. Okay, Ethan has a question. I really enjoyed listening to your story. Thanks, I'm glad. I don't have this type of OCD you describe, but I often struggle with worry of going to hell. Okay, I have to believe in God, but I'm unsaved, condemned because of X, Y, Z. Okay, so right, let's break this down. This is tough. So, okay, so you're having difficulty making peace with an idea that is going against your religion. This is what I understand. So, there's a lot of talk about the fact that being religious and recovering from OCD is definitely compatible. Okay, it might be about, and I have to be careful with this question because I'm not like a life coach or a therapist or anything. I'm just a person who's gotten better from OCD. And I don't want to in any way talk about religion in a way that will offend you or be inappropriate. So, what can I tell you that's going to help? I think focusing on the sides of religion that are like really beautiful, which is like religion is really compatible with unconditional acceptance of others and compassion. Maybe connecting more with that element of your religion and seeing that there are certain elements of religion that can go towards the irrational views of society. So that's not me bad talking about religion, it's just that in all areas of society, we have irrational views. So I think the idea of like, I'm struck off for life for one bad act, we can still be religious and believe in our gods and follow a religious lifestyle with community and really believing in our faith, but at the same time recognize that that is fundamentally, and it comes from an irrational societal view of you are written off if you engage in a bad act. So it might be, there may well be a religious OCD video that you can have more information on this channel, because I'm not experienced in this. Some of the other guys may be able to comment below. If you want to add anything else, Ethan, I could ask one of the other guys to comment further on this for you. But I definitely think that what's happening is that you've latched to this area of religion and that you've become obsessed with it. Whereas other people, if you think about the fact that religious people have made mistakes and they're carrying on with life, they're not worrying as much as you are. And that's because your OCD heightens every fear. And I definitely experienced religion OCD in a small way when I was a child growing up with a religious family, worrying about my thoughts and what what acts would mean. So I can resonate with that really scary feeling. So my advice is to connect with the real beautiful elements of your religion and kind of see the idea of hell that you're obsessing about and worrying about. Try to loosen your rigidity on what that means, I think, because that's a very black and white element of a religious faith, and people are on the scale with religion. So you could start to break that down and have a look into that a little bit more. But I hope that was in some way useful. Thanks for listening today, everybody. If you have a question for me that you would like me to cover in my next video, please comment below, and obviously like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's really great to subscribe because then you get a little notification anytime there's a video so you don't miss any. Ask me anything at all, and in my next Q&A I will be sure to talk to you directly. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.